On a frigid winter evening, Warren Pierce, a solitary man accustomed to the harshness of the Alaskan countryside, found himself at the center of an unexpected drama. His log cabin, snug and warm against the biting cold, had always been a sanctuary from the howling winds and sub-zero temperatures. But nothing could prepare him for the haunting sight that awaited him that night. As he settled into his armchair with a mug of hot tea, a soft scratching at the door drew him from his thoughts. At first, he assumed it might be a stray dog, one of the feral canines that roamed near the outskirts of town. But when he peeked through the frosted window, his heart pounded with disbelief. There, trembling on the porch, stood two wolves, their once proud coats matted with snow and desperation glimmering in their luminous eyes. Warren's instincts warred with caution. Wolves were wild, unpredictable predators, but these creatures were not threatening. They appeared weary, trembling from the cold, and a weak howl escaped one of them, piercing through the silence of the night. Whatever it was that drove them to his door, it was clear they were not here to fight, they were pleading for refuge. Against his better judgment, he opened the door, the gust of icy wind reminding him of the risks. The smaller wolf hesitated, then stepped forward, its eyes filled with a pleading intensity that aroused his compassion. He gestured for them to come inside, his heart racing as he sought to understand the connection forming between them. The wolves crossed the threshold into the warmth of the cabin, leaving faint paw prints in the snow. They began to explore, mirroring Warren's own awe at their raw beauty. He fumbled to check their condition. The smaller wolf limped slightly, and he couldn't miss the visible outline of its ribs. "I need to feed them," Warren murmured, rummaging through his pantry for scraps. He returned, placing raw meat on the floor, stepping back as they approached cautiously. The scent of food made them bolder, and soon they devoured the meal hungrily, their eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. With the wolves fed, Warren settled near the fireplace, a strange bond beginning to weave itself between him and his unexpected guests. As the hours passed, he couldn't shake off the feeling that this encounter was about more than mere survival. It was a pivotal moment that would challenge all he thought he knew about nature and himself. The first night with the wolves was alive with uncertainty and unexpected comfort. As Warren tended the crackling fire, the wolves curled up near the hearth, their breaths mingling with the warmth that enveloped the cabin. Hours wore on, and he eventually succumbed to fatigue, drifting into a troubled sleep. He woke to soft whines, the sound of the smaller wolf shifting anxiously. Something felt different in the air, a mix of urgency and instinct. Warren opened his eyes, assessing the scene. The larger wolf remained alert, eyes flicking toward the door, body poised defensively. With a sense of foreboding, Warren pressed his ear against the cabin door. Outside, the wind howled, a warning cry that sent a chill down his spine. Something felt amiss. Were they truly alone? He felt the larger wolf's watchful gaze as it stood between him and the door, a guardian of sorts. His instincts told him to remain still, to protect his guests from whatever lay beyond. The scratching sounds resumed, and apprehensive, Warren opened the door a crack. Light spilled into the night, illuminating a figure just outside. A woman, bundled and tense, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Are they inside?" she demanded urgently, panic in her voice. Warren hesitated, heart racing. "Who are you?" But the desperation in her eyes was heartbreaking. "I'm hunting those wolves," she admitted, lowering her voice. "They don't belong to the wild anymore, they belong to a pack that's been searching for them. I need to bring them back." Now, Warren felt a mix of anger and fear. "What do you mean? You want to take them away?" Before she could respond, the smaller wolf gave a soft whine, and Warren sensed its anxiety. He gripped his door tighter, unsure whether to let this woman in. The wolves needed help, yes, but who was this stranger really? Ignoring the question looming in his mind, he found himself stepping aside. "All right, you can come in," he said after a moment. But trust was a fragile thing, especially here. As the woman stepped inside, the temperature in the room seemed to drop further. Her name was Evelyn, a wildlife rehabilitation specialist, and she wasted no time assessing the wolves. "They must be terrified," she murmured, kneeling to meet the smaller wolf's gaze, coaxing it closer with her gentle touch. Warren watched the interaction, relieved but anxious. He had grown attached to the wolves, especially the smaller one, whose limp told volumes of its struggles. As Evelyn treated the injured leg, she spoke of a storm brewing outside, one that could very well change their fates. "We have to get them back to my facility before the worst of it hits," she urged. Warren swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders. He knew the wilderness could be cruel, especially during winter, but could he really just let them go? "What if they won't leave?" he asked, the lump in his throat tightening. Evelyn gave him a somber look. they may not have a choice. In this weather, the wild can turn deadly. When the first flurries of snow began to fall outside, swirling through the air with an unsettling frenzy, Warren made a decision. He would do whatever it took to protect these creatures, even if it meant risking everything he knew. So, as the storm's winds howled outside, Warren knew that for better or worse, he was now part of something much bigger than himself, and the wolves were counting on him to guide them forward. When dawn broke, the storm raged on, but hope flickered between the three of them. Warren glanced at the wolves, nestled close together, their breath visible in the biting air. They had become entwined in his life. Perhaps he was more than just an observer, he was their unwilling guardian, one who felt fear and hope in equal measure. As snow piled up outside, the howling wind masked the world, and every now and then, a worry grew within him. What if they never made it to safety? Could he risk their lives further by keeping them here? Evelyn shared stories of rescued wildlife as they prepared for their next steps, her voice warm against the chill that seeped through the cabin. She painted a picture of a center where these wolves could receive proper medical treatment and eventually return to their pack. Warren listened intently, yet a voice in his heart questioned whether he could bear to watch them go again. Suddenly, a chilling howl cut through the storm, echoing from the distance like a portent. Both wolves perked up, their ears twitching. The larger wolf stepped forward, eyes scanning around the room, and for a fleeting moment, Warren saw fear reflected in its vigilant gaze. What was that? Warren asked uneasily, feeling the tension in the air shift. Evelyn frowned, stepping to the window. It's possible their pack is nearby, she whispered. If they're close enough, they might pick up on familiar scents. Now, Warren felt torn. The wind howled outside, but even through the chaos, it beckoned with a sense of urgency. Did they want to find their pack, or would they look to him for safety? The uncertainty hung thick in the air. That afternoon, as darkness began to blanket the land once again and Evelyn prepared to check on their supplies, Warren felt a sudden impulse. I have to find out. I can't just leave them here, he declared, feeling the tension solidify within him. Without fully realizing it, Warren was headed outside, boots plunging into the thick snow one determined step at a time. He called back to Evelyn, I'll find their pack. At first, he thought he could track that howl, a resonance pulling him into the depths of the white wilderness. He moved through trees heavy with snow, his heart pounding with every crunch beneath his feet. But as he pressed onward, he realized the landscape had darkened, visibility dropped, and a chilling wind lashed at his face. Each step brought an overwhelming sense of isolation, yet a glimmer of hope pushed him to carry on. The wolves had taught him something important. Survival often demanded more than just warmth, it required companionship, loyalty, and courage. Time blurred, snow falling heavily around him, he glanced back in search of a landmark. Through the swirling flakes, he spotted a shadow in the distance, a figure emerging from the storm. His heart raced as he took a cautious step towards the silhouette, half expecting it to be a bear or some other fearsome predator. But then, through the veil of snow, it came into view, a wolf, thin and skittish, its eyes wide yet pleading. It was similar to the ones he had sheltered. The moment it spotted Warren, it turned to bolt, but he held his ground. Wait, he called out, trying to catch his breath. I'm not here to hurt you. Finally, the creature halted, panting, its breath curling into vapor. It stood on the edge of the clearing as the wind swirled around it, the stark reality of survival evident in its gaunt frame. Though fear gripped it, it hesitated, searching his eyes for a flicker of understanding. And suddenly, it disappeared into the white void. A pang of despair hit Warren like a hammer. Had he lost it? Had he lost his chance to help this creature? Just then, a familiar howl rose from beyond the trees, a sound echoing the bond of the wild, another wolf, closer. Warren's instincts ignited. He was racing against time, he had to find a way to guide this wolf back to the shelter before the storm buried them all. Warren sprinted through the thickening snow, every fiber of his being focused on following the howls, driven by a newfound determination. He thought of the bond he had formed with the wolves in his cabin, a relationship built on trust and connection. In the distance, he heard rustling, he paused, heart hammering in his chest. The shadows shifted among the trees, and before long, an entire pack emerged, their eyes glowing against the white landscape. But there was one wolf, larger and fierce-looking, that drew his gaze, as if it were the leader. Warren felt the adrenaline surge, his mind racing. What would they do? Would they see him as a threat? But almost instantly, he was enveloped by a strange sensation, a pull that beckoned him forward. Trust, he realized, was not merely a human trait, it existed among the wild, as well. As he approached slowly, the wolf stopped short, assessing him, curiosity battling caution. He reached for the kindness that had flourished in his heart, the same energy that had drawn him to help the two creatures he had rescued. "I'm not here to harm you," he whispered, hands raised just as he had done with the first two wolves. Then, out of the shadows, the two wolves from his cabin stepped forward, their loyalty apparent. The larger one, a brave protector, held its ground, glancing between Warren and the pack, clearly aware of something vital unfolding. The smaller wolf looked to him, recognition igniting a flicker of hope. The leader of the pack edged closer, fur bristling, as though measuring the intentions of the human before it. Warren felt his heart beat powerfully against his rib cage. In this moment, he embodied the bridge between worlds, the connection between human and wolf, survival and compassion. "Your family is here," he murmured, as though speaking the language of nature itself. "They've been waiting for you." The bond among the wolves shimmered like a guiding light, a dance of trust, and in that moment, the tension eased. The leader turned its gaze to the smaller wolf and nuzzled it, giving a subtle command to the others. Warren held his breath, moved by the unspoken conversation. The howls echoed once again, a symphony of survival reverberating through the trees. And as though communicating a shared understanding, all three wolves began to move, following the leader back toward the shelter, with Warren just behind. He dared to hope, believing that perhaps this was how it was meant to be, a reunion forged through compassion, adversity, and the undeniable spirit of the wild. As the pack reached the shelter, Warren stood back, watching as the leader turned to the two wolves he'd protected. The atmosphere thickened with emotion, the air crackled with what felt like a climactic reunion. The concepts of wildness and kinship blurred, and the bonds they shared transcended the barriers of understanding. Evelyn stepped beside Warren, her eyes wide with awe. "You did this," she whispered, tears glimmering in her gaze as the wolves communicated in soft whines and gentle nudges, reconnecting in a way that only they could understand. Warren felt tears sting his own eyes, an unexpected mixture of joy and sorrow settling heavily upon him. A part of him had fought hard to keep them close, but deeper down, he understood that this was where they belonged, together, as a family. The wolves fanned out as they settled in, the larger one once more acting as a guardian, ever watchful as the smaller wolf shyly pressed against its sibling. And amidst the dimming daylight, Warren sensed the truth. While compassion had brought them to this moment, it was freedom that now called to them. As the storm cleared and the first hues of twilight appeared, Evelyn spoke softly, "We should get them ready for transport. It might take a while, but they deserve the best care we can give." Fighting the knot tightening in his throat, Warren nodded. He watched as the pack drew closer together, sensing deep inside him that his role in their journey was far from over. Even as they prepared for their next steps, he felt the fire of connection growing, a bond that would outlast the bitter cold pressing upon them. Together, they worked to ensure the wolves were secure for their next move. With the storm now lifting, they would get them to the wildlife center, where the pack could heal and eventually be returned to the wild. But before they departed the shelter, Warren looked out into the vast wilderness. The space that had once felt isolating now felt imbued with possibility. He whispered a promise into the endless white. One day, he would return, and they would run free together among the trees. Their glances met an unspoken understanding, a rendezvous bound by compassion, a gentle farewell woven into the sweet promise of reunion. As Evelyn led the way, Warren couldn't shake the feeling that their paths had intertwined in ways he could never have anticipated, and together they stepped forward into a world now alive with hope. The journey to the wildlife center was filled with palpable tension, each twist and turn drawing Warren closer to the reality of the wolves' next steps. The promise of safety loomed on the horizon, yet every mile traveled felt like a bittersweet farewell. Once, these animals had been fearsome, wild spirits roaming free. Now they were intertwined with the warmth of his home and the kindness he had found amidst the snow. But Warren reminded himself of the greater purpose. They belonged to each other, and now they would find the healing they needed. As the snow-covered road stretched ahead, Warren and Evelyn took turns glancing back at the wolves, their siblings together nestled within their crates. The larger wolf held a protective stance, eyes scanning the surroundings, always aware, while the smaller wolf remained nestled close, comforted by the familiar warmth of family. "Warren," Evelyn spoke up, breaking the silence. "I understand how tough this is for you. But we did our part, and soon they'll be able to thrive again. That's something worth celebrating." Her words struck a chord deep within him. He knew she was right. With a nod, he replied, "I just wish I could give them the life they deserve." Evelyn smiled gently. "You've done more than you realize. You've given them hope." As they drove closer, the echoes of the wolves' pack calls lingered in his heart. Every moment spent in their presence had illuminated parts of himself he never knew existed: fear and tenderness, strength and vulnerability, and above all, the sacred bond forged through compassion. The Wildlife Center came into view, a bustling hub of activity where wolves, like those now in the crates, could receive the medical care they needed to thrive again. When they arrived, staff members welcomed them with urgency, eager to assist the recovering trio. Together, they transported the wolves into their new quarters, allowing them a brief moment of respite before the medical team began examining their minor injuries. Throughout it all, Warren hung back, heart racing as he prepared himself for the ultimate farewell. Evelyn approached him, her words a soothing balm. "They'll receive top-notch care, I promise," she said. "And once they're healed, you'll have the opportunity to see them return to the wild, where they belong." Warren smiled at the thought of seeing them where they truly thrived. But as he turned to look at the wolves, their heavy eyes filled with gratitude and curiosity, he felt the weight of the bond they had shared. And just as he stepped forward to give them one last comforting glance, the larger wolf tilted its head, meeting his gaze. In that moment, an understanding blossomed between them, a whispered promise carried on the wind: "We will find our way back to each other." And so, Warren left the Wildlife Center with tears in his eyes but hope in his heart. The wolves were in capable hands. They would heal, run wild, and thrive as they were meant to. In a world where paths intertwined and destinies collided, Warren embraced the lessons of empathy he had learned, knowing that sometimes, compassion forged the strongest bonds between humans and the wild, beyond the walls of his cabin, into the very heart of freedom itself. Back at home, as he gazed into the dimming light of the evening sky, he knew this was not just a farewell, it was the beginning of a new journey. One that would unite them again beneath the vast Alaskan wilderness, a journey woven into the very fabric of nature's wild embrace.